Hello and welcome to Back to Play, Restarting Youth Soccer webinar presented by SOCCER.COM. My name is Darren Smith, and today I have been joined by 4 soccer experts who have kindly taken the time to discuss the topic of restarting youth soccer. Our panelists will share how their organisations are retaining players under the current circumstances, as well as provide insight and suggestions on how to plan ahead and prepare for the time when youth soccer is feasible once again. Before I introduce our expert panel, a big thank you to all of you who registered for this webinar, and to everyone who is working so hard to stay in the game and keep the ball moving over this period. It's this type of dedication and passion that makes our soccer community so special. We continue to support our club partners with helpful content on the SOCCER.COM guide and on social media. However, we felt it was essential to facilitate a discussion on the subject of restarting play as soccer clubs across the nation begin to devise plans to get back on the field. During the webinar, if you have any questions or anything to add, don't forget to use the question box. My colleague Elizabeth will be monitoring the submissions in real time, and we hope to address them in a timely manner. This discussion is being recorded in case you need to refer back to it or would like to share with others in the soccer community. On that note, let's introduce today's panel. Recently inducted into the Colorado Soccer Hall of Fame, having founded and helped grow the biggest club in Southern Colorado, overseeing the development and opening of the first privately owned soccer facility in the region, somebody who has supported their club in numerous championships at the state and regional level, representing Pride Soccer Club, Executive Director, Candy Brooks. How are you, Candy?
Hi, thanks.
Thanks for being here. Our next guest, originally from Long Island, New York, played collegiately at Williams College before playing 8 years in the USL A-League, 11 years as Executive Director, 5 years as DOC, and 1 year as staff coach. He has a wealth of experience. Executive Director of Beach FC in Virginia and President of Club Champions League, Steve Dambuski. How's it going, Steve?
Hey, Darren, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Next, we are lucky to have been joined by someone with over 30 years of demonstrated results, both as a coach at all levels of youth soccer and as a professional player, earning him 6 caps for the US national team. He has been honored for his ongoing commitment to the game through receipt of his Golden Scarf Award from the Seattle Sounders and is a member of the Washington State Youth Soccer Hall of Fame. Seattle United Director of Soccer, Jimmy McAllister. Hey, Jimmy.
Hey, how you doing? Good afternoon.
Our fourth and final guest today is originally from Dublin, Ireland. He is the founder and executive director of Chicago City Soccer Club and is head coach of their WPSL team and was named Conference Coach of the Year in 2019. Nick Mulvaney. Hey, Nick.
You doing all well?
Hey, thanks for being here. Thanks to everyone for being here. You know, on behalf of everybody listening and everyone at SOCCER.COM, we greatly appreciate your willingness to discuss, you know, what is a tough topic. So without further ado, let's get into this. Candy, we're gonna start with you. Right in at the deep end. When will you consider it safe to get players back on the field for training?
You know, we're all looking at that, and thanks for this big question, the very first one off the bat. Really appreciate it. No, all good. Colorado, we may be in a different state than everybody else, but I think we're all looking to when it's safe for our kids to go back out. We're under directions to, we're hoping to get back in June, the first part of June, in some semblance of play. But again, we all have to look at what's best in the long term and the health of all of our membership. We're very lucky that our state and governor and our Colorado Soccer Association is helping us guide through this. We're looking at the risk mitigation, and we're probably looking at phases and what those phases will look like. The first phase being very one-on-one and small groups. Our parks are still closed. So we're like most of you, we can't get back out. But when we do, we want to come back out and make sure it's safe and bring in all of the requirements. You know, are we going to have face masks? Are we going to be sanitizing things and what that will require? And we're looking at that as a group to see what's going to be the best. But I think safety is the underlying word that all of us will say when it's safe and when we get that direction from our governing bodies.
Perfect. What about you, Steve, in Virginia?
Yeah, very, very similar. You know, Virginia, I believe, was one of the first, you know, to basically cancel school for the remainder of the year and have a stay-at-home order through June 10th. So in some ways, you know, that made it a little bit easier to plan because you know that you can't even consider anything until that point arrives. I would say that what we've been spending our time doing is very similar. We're looking at a number of contingency plans. We had already built our summer calendar over the winter, and what we've done is basically take that, tweak it, ask our directors to look at the possibility of moving it to a July 1. We host a big sand soccer tournament in this area that benefits our complex, which was originally scheduled for early June. They've been able to kick that back to August, and so it's a little bit of just kind of take your template, see if you can move it back, see if you can be agile and flexible on the fly, and then obviously use all the health information that we can, because I agree with Candy in that it's probably going to be a stair-stepped approach, and that it's not going to be a switch that gets flipped where you're allowed out all at once. So we're preparing for everything in the background, but regardless of whenever it is, I think we'll be able and ready to, even if it's just small group training and having kids get out and about, we'll be able to use our facilities and the expertise of our directors and coaches to be able to get people out of what will end up being a long-term, kind of stay-at-home situation.
Good stuff. And finally, Nick, up in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo everything they said, the same. Our league's cancelled last week, so we're in the process of just kind of coordinating with other clubs again when and if we get out to kind of get some friendly games in. We know that may look very different to the teams that we may have now, but again, we just want to get out as soon as we can. We're going to abide by all the safety rules and everything else that's going with it, and just letting our members know that we will make up every single hour that was missed this spring. That will be priority number one, and making sure that we look after our members going into fall, hopefully.
Perfect. And staying with you, Nick, obviously when we hopefully get back on the field, have you been beginning discussions on how to implement any, things to mitigate the safety risks that players, parents, coaches might fear? Have you thought about, temperature checks, face masks? Are you looking into some of those things right now?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely had discussions. We've had a couple of Zoom calls with different clubs and what everyone else is again sharing the ideas that we're doing here. And if it is small groups, it's going to be dependent on the parks as well for us, because we actually do rent from our local schools and the park district. So that's probably going to be one of our biggest challenges when this happens. Definitely keeping potentially parents or whoever else might be in cars, small group training, distance. I mean, it can be done again if we're able to do it. Temperature checks, I wouldn't say we've gone that far, but definitely one that we've considered after coming up on our process.
Okay, and just staying with you, Nick, you talk about, you rent facilities and stuff like that. So have you gotten any information or directions from, facility owners or local governments about this? Are they staying in touch with you during this time, or?
No, I think it's just kind of pay attention to the news and pay attention to the governor's, rulings on it, and that's the best we can. And then they're just waiting on them to be able to do that as well. So it's just been kind of overall no real one-to-one conversations per se. But we know that we can't go out, so it's simple as that, really.
Sure. And then going back to Candy, talking a bit more about, those mitigation that we could implement to get through the process of getting people back on the field. Have you been having conversations with your board members or any other people at the organization?
We have. I'm lucky to be in a state that collaborates a lot and works together. We've been on, task forces together across the state to find out what's going on in northern Colorado compared to what's going on in southern Colorado. No different than anybody else. Some of our municipalities closed down much earlier than others. Some have been harder hit than others. We're all anxious to get back out, but we're all talking about how do we mitigate and put it back in. Mitigation would include smaller size games, keeping parents in the car. I know we've all wanted that for years and years, and now we have a reason to do that, even though we probably shouldn't. But reducing the number on the sidelines. our referees wearing face masks, providing hand sanitizers, then things for the balls to be cleaned on everything. How can we work with the laws of the game? Do we have to change them if we're not going to have everybody holding the ball? Is everything going to be starting with a kick? I think when we all get back out to play, we're all so anxious. We've been working with our referee crew and everyone across the state. We just all want to get back out into play. It's not going to look like it would have 2 months ago. And it may not look the same 2 months from now, but we're going to get back out and play and mitigate and do the things to change it. Everybody may not look the same. We may have, 11 versus 9, but everybody just wants to play and be safe and get back on the pitch.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it looks like we may have lost Jimmy. Hopefully he
Darren,
can join us.
I'm back on the audio, Darren.
Okay,
I can hear you.
Perfect. So that's great. So Jimmy, if you can chime in via audio, that would be great. We've had a question. The 3 people here have spoken about working in small groups. How do we limit the exposure to coaches and keep coaches safe? Because if we are working in smaller groups, it might mean more sessions for our coaches. So obviously we have to think about the players and we have to think about spectators, but specifically for the coaches who could be working with lots and hundreds of children in a week, how can we help keep them safe?
Yeah, well, we've been working on a schematic for the field, and we've had an open space for coaches to keep coaches away. We're working on some technical stuff to train in small groups. I've heard some of the conversation. Obviously, we're governed by the governor of the state of Washington when he says we can come back and play. We also have at Seattle United a medical advisory committee. The head of the medical advisory committee is a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Dresner. He's a Seahawk and University of Washington doctor. So he's working with us on ways we can get back to training, even down to who carpools with who. How can you trace if somebody gets sick? You can trace it back to their training group and so on and so forth. I believe with everybody, it's not going to be the same as it's always been, even down to kids bringing their own pennies or bibs so you're not sharing. I've heard masks. I have our medical advisory committee vetting masks right now in terms of wearing as players, as referees, as coaches, as spectators. Again, not letting parents come on the field, so on and so forth. Having staging times for training, when certain kids come in, when certain kids leave. I think every club should have a 10-point sign of hand sanitizers, keeping your bags apart, not drinking out of the same bottle, so on and so forth, keep the high fives down and all that. So I think for being in the game a long time, I'm very, very impressed how many very smart people there are involved in this game. From when I started to kind of an amateur out of your trunk deal, youth soccer's really turned into a profession, and there's some really smart people. And if you listen and follow their lead, I think you'll go in the right direction.
Yeah, some great insights. Talking of smart people, Steve, we've had a couple of questions come in about, face masks or face coverings. Do you think, some of these things that we might implement when we get back on the field, do we think some of them will be short term, or do we think it might actually change the way the game is played and watched on a permanent basis?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I do think some of them are probably inevitably going to be short term. I mean, I can remember back in the day as a volunteer assistant college coach up in Massachusetts, going and watching some high school games, and there was a mouth guard rule, right? And I think what happened is that came out of a specific situation where, the immediate effect was let's protect, and then I think over time you loosen those restrictions. So, as former players, I think we'd all imagine that face masks would be difficult, to play with, but that there could lead to some production of some technologically advanced face masks. There could be just some best practices that are put into place. But I think in the short term, everyone is going to err on the side of caution, and I think that's a good thing. So I don't know how it's going to look in the long run, but I want to echo something Jimmy said in that, this is where your soccer leadership groups, right? And you're at the club level, at the league level, at the state association level. There are going to be committees. There are going to be constant communication among groups. There's going to be medical groups. There's going to be advisory boards. And I think, there are going to be some experts in fields that will ultimately weigh out the pros and cons of everything. in order to point everybody in the right direction to standardize a return to play approach.
Perfect. So moving on a little bit, away from the safety element and more onto sort of player retention. Nick, you started a club 7 years ago. You've built your membership up over that time. Do you have any concerns about maintaining your player base when soccer restarts?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, it's something I'd like to say we're proud of what we've done and what we've created, because we haven't had a mass email or calls about refunds and credits. We've been very upfront from day one. We've been transparent through all this of what's going on. We did a live webinar last Saturday with all our directors, and it was well attended. It was well taken on board of what our plans are again with the situation. We've kept all our staff on full time, 12 of them. We didn't make any cuts. We're going as planned. And I think that says a lot about the culture that we've created here in the city, and hopefully it stays that way as we move forward. So right now we're just considering and making sure that every player that's in our club right now is looked after. We've done a full-blown virtual. That's why I'm in here. I've been doing virtual live sessions in here twice a week. And I think my message to anyone out there is, now is the time you've got to put in the hours and hours to make sure that they stay with you, and that they see that obviously, you're innovative and you're doing everything you can, not just to keep the kids fit, but to keep them sane and give them some hope that when we do get out, we're ready to go. So I'm confident, but again, we just don't know. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. That's right. So Jimmy, during this time, what methods are you guys using to make sure that you retain the players that you do have? And are you doing anything differently to attract new players during this time?
Well, in Seattle, our guys, in Washington, our guys have decided to have a placement. We're not going to have a tryout because we don't know when we could get major groups of kids on the field to have a physical tryout. So our club, just like Nick has said, we've been dealing with online content. The little guys, we've had scavenger hunts, technical, tactical meetings. We've had yoga classes for parents. We're doing everything we can to keep our community engaged. If you stay in front of them, let them know what you're doing, I think you have a much better chance of coming out on the other end. We have a club of, I think we had 2,200 last year. Right now we have 2,000 signed up, and we're going to start the selection process the first of next month. So we're a few days away, and we're doing very well. Of course, in the end of the day, you have to get kids to sign up and get their parents to engage, but we're going to do a maintenance program in our club to keep the kids ticking over, keep a spot on the roster, keep the content coming until we can physically play. Because the reality is, none of us know when we'll be back on the field and it'll look like it once did, 11v11 or 9v9 or 7v7, whatever you pay. But the more you can keep the kids engaged, the better off you are. And I think most everybody's doing a great job of that. And to be honest with you, some of the stuff we've done, I think we'll keep for the long run. It's been fantastic. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got problems with fields. I would think the guys in downtown Chicago would have as many problems with fields as we do in Seattle. So the online stuff is really a new way to engage the kids without having to rent the field space or fight for field space with Timmy Schultz in Colorado or whoever you're dealing with, right? So I think there's some great stuff that's come out of this time, looking at it in a positive way.
Okay, and talking of Colorado, going back to you, Candy, when it comes to, recovering either reduced player counts or attracting new players, what do you think will be sort of the biggest priorities in terms of strategy? Do you think it will be, ensuring that the level of coaching is still high, making sure that training is widely available? Is it club branding, image? What sort of things do you think are gonna play the biggest factor in this?
Sure. Well, I think all of the above of what you just said, honestly. I'm going to echo what Nick said and say, I'm lucky we've kept all of our staff, and very proud of that, to be able to retain them and have them work through and what they've been providing with everybody. I think the biggest thing to me is to reinforce that we're essential. I'm not trying to put down any medical workers or all of the people that are on the front line and doing things out there, but soccer is essential. Youth sports are essential. And I think that's what we have to let our parents know and convey to our membership. just like all of everybody's echoed in here, we're doing things online. I'm so happy with the things that we're doing. And we too will probably keep a lot of them. Great stuff. The creativity that we've seen through our membership, through our docs and our other coaches, we'll probably incorporate those. But I think the biggest thing for me is to say it is essential. We're not just kicking a soccer ball. It's the culture and the family that we have built. And I think it's important for everyone's mental health. Kids in front of their Xboxes are not the healthiest things out there, and the sooner we can get them all back out there, we're all going to start to feel better, not just our kids. But I've got DOCs that are probably driving each other crazy right now and their wives, because they've never been home so much during this time of the year, and husbands and everything. So we want to get back out there. We're essential, and that's what we're going to focus on, is making sure that we provide all of the above things that you said to everybody to get back out there.
Good stuff. And then, Steve and Virginia, are you doing anything differently to retain or attract new players during this time? And, going a step further, are you collaborating with anybody else, any vendors, any other clubs in, collaborating with them during this time, sharing resources?
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. Our league, the Club Champions League, which basically spans Virginia, Maryland, and West Virginia, our league is structured where we have soccer leaders as the board members, and so we were basically able to not skip a beat. Our board meetings are full, a bunch of soccer professionals around a table that talk about the operation, the daily operation, the seasonal operation of our youth environment. So when everything went sideways, the first thing we did was we got on a number of calls. We've been collaborating with groups all around our region because nobody had a roadmap for how to deal with this. So when nobody has a roadmap, you just turn to the people that you trust, and the people that you trust are the ones, even the clubs next to us that we're sharing facilities with. That's been one of the eye openers through this, is that I don't want to sound cliche, but we're all in this together. And I see, there's been some coalitions, if you will, that have been formed where it's like, look, let's talk about the greater good. We might all be competitors on the field, and maybe in the same markets that are hoping to get the same players to sign up, but there's a time and a place for that. And right now it's about making sure that the game doesn't take a step back. So, I'll even go so far as, this is a little bit of outside our scope, but up in the Metro DC area, the DMV, which is DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia, there's a big population hotbed, and a lot of those clubs are in our league, and even the clubs who aren't in our league, they have formed a coalition called, I think it's DMV United, and they've been working together, and we've been part of those conversations even on the outside of Northern Virginia, because we have so much representation up there about standardizing certain tryout times, right? Typically, you're going to see somebody, advertise their tryout date. The next club next door is they're gonna, do it a little bit earlier to try and grab something. So these guys are working on, a standardized set of timelines and best practices that they will all adopt across the board. And, when you see that stuff happening, you really hope that it can continue well beyond when we see the pandemic finish, because that's really what it's all about. And I echo what everybody's already said. The big picture is, really making sure that we can create an environment that people feel, safe to come back, and that they feel that, everyone's going to be ready to be on the fields, but we have to provide an environment and be thinking on our feet in order to provide that service that we have not been able to provide over the past couple of months.
Good stuff. So, Nick, we're talking a lot about how, clubs are engaging their players during this time, and how, the discussion of mitigating safety once we get back to it. But obviously there's another element here, and that's the financial side of things. There are going to be a lot of parents of players who may have unfortunately been furloughed or lost their jobs, who are financially struggling during this time. Are you guys, looking at your financial model and how you might be able to support families there?
Yeah, Steve, well said though on the coalition. I think people's true colours are going to come to light in this time, and I've already seen it, and it's great to see. It really is. Being in the city of Chicago, we do a lot of scholarship. I've luckily only had to deal with, I think, a handful right now of families with lots of jobs, and they wanted to pull them out of the virtual learning. And I'm like, no, we're not going to allow the kids to be hurt through this. We'll figure out the finances later. And luckily this week, we actually had an organization reach out to me who set up this organization, All Kids Play, and they want to help. They want to help any parents or families that are going through that. So in terms of, I guess, reevaluating our financials, there's not a whole lot we can do per se. We'll try and keep our fees the same as next year. But the one thing I've said, and I said on our webinar on Saturday, was, besides making up all the hours from spring missed, all this virtual stuff is complimentary. But we're looking at many, many other ways of providing different events, programs, camps, all for free, complimentary, as some sort of give back to show the support, obviously, our members are continuing to show us. So it's going to be tricky again. And the one thing I am grateful for, and I think most clubs can speak on here as well, is our staff have been putting in probably more hours than they ever have, right? Because they're just constantly doing the grading and the assignments and the workouts, and again, dealing with family and those kind of things within their home. So, it's one of those, again, it's an unknown. I mean, we're doing everything we can behind the scenes to make sure that we can, like Andy said, and I've said this as well, is we want to be an organization that's there in the future. Yes, we're concerned about now, but I'm looking at fall, winter, spring next year, and are we going to be here for these kids and these families, because it is a massive outlet and they need it. And one thing I will add in is, in terms of the mental health piece, we brought on a group called, it's Adler University in downtown, students that need their hours in psychology, their sports consultants. We've had them in now about 2.5 years, and they have been amazing through this process, doing one-on-one consultations with families, just with kids, just with parents. We do coaches workshops, which we did anyway, but it's kind of that piece. If you can add that to your, to your training program weekly, I'd recommend it, because we all need it right now. We all need it.
Absolutely. And then going back to you, Candy, going back to sort of the financial model and, supporting players who whose families might be, going through even more challenging times. Are you looking at that differently right now?
Yeah, I think my financial modeling changes daily. We just call it fluid modeling is what we're saying now, because every time we think we've got something down, something changes for us. We're looking at a couple of different things. We know the hardship is going to be different across the board. We have parents that are going to really need help moving forward. Echoing a lot of what Nick said, we're looking for different programs and things we can offer our clubs. We're also looking at, is there a way to maybe bring some of these players into a different realm? One thing that none of us have mentioned today is our referees. Our referees are hurting as well, and a lot of those are the people that depended on that extra income, not just our 1099 coaches and our staff, but our referees as well. And our state's been very lucky to put into place, and I know several others are as well, ways for our kids to take that referee licensing course. That's going to put a little extra income in their pocket, we hope, when they come back, as well. Maybe help them appreciate the referees a little bit more. I don't know if it'll cut down on my coaches screaming at the referees, but I sure hope it does. So I guess that's one of the ways, and we're looking at other things outside of the box. What can we do? We're not increasing our fees. We know that. We can't. We wouldn't do that. We're reaching out to SOCCER.COM. I'll plug you guys. What are we doing? What can you do for us? How can we help to give back what we're doing? We're looking at our registration platform. We use Sports Connect and saying, guys, we need your help. How can we make this easier for our parents? What if they are in hardship? And what about those parents that are lucky enough to donate? How can they give back and make that an easy thing? So I think those are some of the outside of the box things we're looking at financially. There's many more. And I keep listening to things like today to get other ideas, because we're all in this together, and we all can depend on each other to hear different things. Just like that training toolbox that we all use as coaches, we pull a couple ideas from executive directors as well.
Absolutely. You bring up a good point, talking about registration. So Jimmy, are you going to change anything in the registration process down the line? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've made our registration free. They're not charging anything down. We're going to charge a maintenance fee of $80 a month until we get into full soccer. And the reason why we charged $80 a month, we figured out our burn rate to keep essential staff, and you figure out what you need to generate through that burn rate to keep the club going. So I think it's essential, and I agree with everybody. We're going to see more financial aid. Our club's never turned down a financial aid recipient, and our criteria is quite simple. It's free and reduced lunch at schools. There's going to be people hurting, there's no question, and we're fortunate that Seattle is pretty at times well off in terms of the income from the parents, but still people are losing their jobs. Our job, I feel, is to keep people engaged in the game. How do you do that? Charging or upcharging or asking for an increase at this time would be, for me, not the right thing for us to do. I mean, we're trying to keep the price down. We're trying to make sure every kid can play. We're also looking at limiting our travel for the time being. I don't think any parent's going to look forward to sticking their kid on a plane the first week we start playing to go to a tournament. I know that will hurt that economy a bit, but we have to do what we have to do. I think we'll restrict our travel to essential travel. When I say essential travel, maybe a U17 team with kids looking to get, scholarships or whatever else. But we're going to cut our travel and do everything we can to make the game accessible to all the kids.
Steve, do you think this will result in, a localization of the game and less travel for, tournaments or matches?
I absolutely do. I think I don't think I've read anything to the contrary over the past few weeks, and obviously from the 2 points that we're mainly talking about is obviously health, number one, and hopefully that's a short-term consideration, because you would assume at some point there will be a vaccine, there will be this will be more under control than now, but it's still very, very kind of in front of us right now. But the longer lasting one is probably going to be the economic piece. And going back to what Jimmy said, when you look at an event, and this is the hard part because it's a balance, right? We host 2 tournaments, 2 travel tournaments, 1 rec tournament. It used to be more than that. We, over the past few years, have purposefully become less reliant on that tournament revenue. The tournaments were always the best fundraiser in youth soccer, but as youth soccer grew, so did the tournament market, so did the flooding of the market, and then people go to these things and they spend $500-600 out of pocket that doesn't even hit club money because it's a state of play. It is you're having to like feed your family for 3 days, right? You've gone to one game a day formats, which is great from a technical standpoint, but all it does is just kind of keep the cash register flowing, right? And there's a balance of which of those events that are very, very important and which can you do without. And it has to be a balance because, going back to Candy's point with the financial modeling, our fiscal year is July 1. So I have a budget in for review right now. And, we hold tournaments. We have sponsors that, may not have the disposable income to continue to contribute to that level, not out of willingness, but out of necessity. And so you have to get creative on how you rely on these. And I'll go back to earlier to, the leadership within, in this case, the club, having a strong board, having a financial committee, having, control of your reserves and planning for, who knows when this thing is gonna lift. And if it does lift, will it come back in the fall or winter? And we're going to have another pause, which could be extremely detrimental. You've got to be able to weather those things and keep things ticking over, because ultimately it will get back to normal, but it will be a new normal.
Right. And then Nick, just touching upon tryouts again briefly, are you guys looking to do something different with tryouts registration, when things return?
Yes and no. I mean, we've again put out on Saturday that everybody has a place to play. We've said we're going to keep teams as are and coaches as are, which we've never done until later because you just don't know. That can change, obviously. And then we said if there's any parents that feel that kid needs to be moved up, to schedule a consultation with our technical staff and myself, and let's have that conversation. Then we also spoke about for new players, we can do an online consultation, a virtual technical piece if they have a bit of space to do it. I mean, we've all been in this game long enough, especially with the younger ages. we know the level that they're at even there to start off with. They may move up later on when we get out. For existing players that other clubs to send video in, which a lot of parents now are video games, and obviously lastly, what level they're playing at now. One thing I will share, and I know other clubs have asked me about this, and they want to start as soon as they get out, they're going to run tryouts. I completely disagree with that from a member's perspective right now. Is our kids want to train, so let's get out and let's train. If you want to come to our club, you're more than welcome to come into that session, and we'll, in terms of safety, we'll figure that out. But for me, tryouts is secondary right now. We want to make sure that our existing players and families are looked after number one. So that's my priority when it comes to tryouts.
Yeah, I think obviously the importance of making it accessible for everybody, when they return is critical to all of us. Just want to touch upon summer programs. Obviously, it is difficult, but Steve, have you essentially cancelled all summer programs at this time? Any camps, postseason tournaments, and anything else like that?
Yeah, we haven't canceled them. We've postponed them. We had built the registration platforms long before COVID started, and what we haven't done is explicitly advertise them. Right? If people stumble upon them and they want to sign up, great. That's fine. But if they don't come off, we'll refund them, because those are kind of the more retail type environments and not an annual type of event. But what we've done is we've asked our directors to get creative, right? We have a certain number of camps and clinics and continuation training. We only have a handful of like Monday to Friday camps. What we've typically opted for in the summer is continuation training, where it might be, 12 sessions over 4 weeks. So two or three times a week to let people go to the beach and not kind of have that camp environment. And so what we've done is we've asked the directors of those programs, hey, use July, right? That would typically start maybe in mid-June, late June when school ends. Go into July. Let's see if we can adjust the schedule internally to see if we can get everything in. And if not, then we either basically cut down a few sessions and prorate the cost, or we add some added value in during the season. The other thing I will say is we invested in a futsal facility a couple of years ago. We have a 20,000 square foot indoor facility that, again, we're paying mortgage on, and so you can't let the dollar signs and the mortgage force you into bad decisions. But at the same time, we can get creative if and when the bans are lifted. We can do more that don't require lights, that if there's thunderstorms or inclement weather, we can bring things in here. So if somebody signed up for something and we decide to postpone it, we can get creative in a number of ways to make sure that value is being felt. And if it can't, then we'll cancel it and provide refunds.
And Jimmy, are you in a similar spot when it comes to summer programs and training throughout the off season?
Yeah, pretty much. Our retail business would be camps. We have a tournament that's a select tournament, and so on and so forth. We're not as lucky as Steve to have a sandy beach to go to. Ours is rocky and cold, but we do summer programs. But our fields in Seattle are closed till June 19th already. So we don't know what's going to happen, but we've told people that they'll get their refunds if the camps don't come off. Our camps run through the end of August and our tournaments in July, but most likely those will be postponed. Kind of like Nick, we need to get our teams back playing. We need to get, as opposed to worrying about tryouts, get the existing kids that are signed up ready to go. But I would I'm ready to write refund checks for people for our camps and so on and so forth.
And talking about refunds, Candy, and with the financial difficulties many families are going to be going through right now, do you feel added pressure to expedite that process and cancel events and try and address it straight up, or are you very much postponing and trying to see what happens?
Sure. Well, yesterday we received word that our spring season was canceled through Colorado Soccer Association. So we're like everybody else. We're finding out. We're evaluating what we can do. We're looking at what those credits are and how we can best give back to our families. Just a couple hours before this went out, sent an email out to everybody and hopefully be able to address the specifics next week. We're probably pretty much the same across the board in Colorado. Everybody's doing the same thing. We're all prioritizing just getting back on the pitch and training with our kids like everybody's echoed here. We are lucky enough, our tryouts do not start until June 22nd. That's a statewide date for everybody. So we have kind of told everybody, okay, let's get back working with our kids, and then we'll work with tryouts. Our tryouts are at no cost. We hopefully will be able to work with families that are in need and address those needs if refunds are needed. And we're like everybody else, we're working with a lot of credits and hopefully being able to retain those players through the fall season or later if we need to. Our only heartbreaks are for our seniors because we can't give them a season, and that is what is tough for everybody here on this phone call, I know, and a lot of people listening is we don't have an answer for our graduating seniors. Some of them that have been with us since they're 4 years old, you know, you've watched them grow up, and so no refund, no credit, nothing that we say today is going to help those kids.
Sure. No, thank you very much for that. And then going back to Nick, you know, I asked Steve earlier about, you know, whether we think there'll be some long-term effects to how the game is either played, coached, or watched in the future. How do you think this might change the game as a whole?
I hope not a lot.
Yeah, not everything.
All
You what? What did you say, Darren?
Yeah, let's talk about spectators. I mean, do you think the way, you know, parents watch games going forward is going to change dramatically?
I mean, you can say yes, right, based off what we've been told in the media and that. I mean, it's all unknowns. I will say one of the best things we did this year was we invested in VO camera system, which we've used throughout the club for the past year, you know, game and practice analysis. Maybe it's a thing where they're able to view it from home, in their cars, on their phones, digitally. I mean, the one thing this has also showed us is the innovation that everyone has had to come up with, the creativity with technology. And I mean, me myself, I've learned so much over the last couple of weeks because I've had to. So, I mean, I really don't know. I think that I can answer that in a million ways, but to me, it could be smaller numbers, you know, and then that hurts your rosters and things like that. So it's all up in the air right now, and we'll see. But digitally, it was already coming, right? Esports is there. It's coming on us now, probably more than ever, and hopefully we hold that and make sure we get the kids back outside. But I'm not sure that answers your question.
You know, I'm not sure there is a definitive answer to the question. You know, we're just very much looking, you know, for your opinions. And Jimmy, I'd ask you something similar. You know, having been in the game for a long time, do you think the way parents will manage their kids being in a program and coming to watch training and games will change dramatically?
You know, I think in the short term,
In the short term,
I think people will go back to what they are. Speaking as a parent, I think to be, speaking of parent, you know, we all, those of us that have kids, and I think to be a great youth soccer coach, you've had to experience having kids. We're all emotionally tied to those kids. We'll always be drawn back into it. And some people that carry on the sidelines and don't behave properly are doing that out of the emotional, you know, being they have with their own kids. So I understand all that. I think that there's been a lot of good programs to work with parents. I think, you know, there's things going on, but I think it'll change in the short term. Eventually, I think it'll go back. But the habits, the washing the hands, the social distancing, the no high-fiving, all that stuff is here to stay. The sharing the water bottles, the, you know, the pennies and all that. Bring your own ball to training. That's gonna be forever changed, I would think, in the new normal.
Okay, perfect. Well, with that, unfortunately, we have reached the end of today's discussion. So thank you to everyone who attended, and big thank you to our panelists for being part of today's session. So Candy, Jimmy, Nick, Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember, if you do have a follow-up question for any of our panelists, please feel free to reach out to us at SOCCER.com, at team@sportsendeavors.com, or on social media. We really want to continue the discussion. Let us know how your clubs are handling the prospect of restarting play and how you guys might be mitigating safety fears.
Hey, Darren,
Stay tuned for our...
I'd
Hello.
also like to thank soccer.com. This is Jimmy for putting this together. It means a lot for people to be able to see such high quality soccer directors and executive directors talking about what they're going to do. It makes a big difference to all of us to have that knowledge out there. And that's what it's all about. And I really appreciate you guys doing that.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks
Absolutely.
very much. Stay tuned for our weekly email updates featuring at-home soccer content, including advice from athletes, video resources, sports psychology, and more to help you and your team stay in the game. You can find those resources on SOCCER.com website and on our guide 24/7. Remember to follow and use our hashtag #KeepTheBallMoving on social media. That way you can stay informed of any future webinars that we're doing. And finally, remember to regularly check the CDC website for the latest information on how to protect yourself and others around you. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you.